I sat on the edge of a cracked vinyl couch, blotchy sunlight from a narrow window striping the studio floor. My uncle, drenched in Tokyo's perpetual summer sweat, squatted low in his faded armchair. He sipped from his blue mug. My mother hovered near the sink, arms folded, face brittle with the promise of disappointment. This was a place I never really called home, but it was where I landed after I spoke my truth. I'd summoned them all. Family and neighborhood faces, the ones who always seemed to know better, or at least louder. I was desperate, but at the time, I called it hope. I'd just secured a trainee position at a minor publication. Investigative journalist, I'd announced a week before, chest swelling, voice breaking. Today was the promised career talk. I told myself I could make them see what I saw, but it didn't go that way. My cousin Hiroki, still in his slouch from high school, flicked through my meager article samples on an old iPad. Each swipe more condescending. Who cares about the Shibuya rent protests? Didn't that happen like last year? His mouth curled into a sneer. I tried to ignore him and pressed on. I want to dig into stories nobody else will. Expose the things people hide, I stammered. They heard ambition. They translated it as stupidity. You could go sell phones at SoftBank, my aunt said, polishing a rusted teapot. Journalism doesn't pay for your own shoes. Ridiculous, my mother finally said, slapping a damp towel on the counter for punctuation. Yuri, you're chasing clouds. She spoke so quietly, the words twisted sharp as a knife. Even your own school gave you average marks. No one's waiting for you. A few neighbors had drifted in, half courtesy, half entertainment. Mrs. Saito, who ran the flower shop, old Mr. Nakagawa, a friend of my grandfather's. They watched, silently judgmental, as if I was a child denying bedtime. Someone laughed. My cousin's girlfriend, I think. She didn't even try to hide it. A sharp bark that made me cringe. Fire burned behind my ribs. But anger was too dangerous, so I lied. I nodded, tried to smile. I felt the heat in my ears, vision swimming. I remember Hiroki grinning. Write an article about this, Yuri. That'll get you published. And then, nothing. Just faces blurring as I left. The door clapped shut behind me. In the stairwell, it was muggy and close. I stopped halfway down. Hand on the sweaty metal rail, and just breathed. That was the closest I came to quitting. I moved into a 6-mat room in Shin-Okubo, the walls thin as rice paper, every neighbor's argument seeping through. My shoes wore holes fast, crossing the city for internships, meetings, interviews. Tokyo, from inside a second-hand suit, felt huge and cold. Sometimes I craved the certainty of rejection more than the uncertainty of ambition. It would hurt less. At work, I was the errand runner, coffee fetcher, the one who triple-checked comma placements. Nights, I forced words onto the screen in public libraries, eyes burning, stomach growling with missed meals. The city raged endlessly outside, sirens, laughter, rain hammering rooftops at odd hours. My first byline was a tiny piece about local food shops folding under rent hikes. I called my mother when it printed. She barely listened. "That's nice, Yuri," she said, voice thick with sleep or apathy. "Don't stay up late." Days blurred into months. The criticism in that studio haunted me, lingering like an aftertaste. Sometimes I'd see a headline and imagine them mocking me from afar. I found my solace in the city's overlooked alleys, ramen cooks fighting eviction, a delivery driver sleeping in a van. I started chasing bigger game stories police wouldn't touch, stories that could hurt to publish. A rumor of corruption led me deep into Shinjuku's legal gray zones, shadowed by men loitering under neon. Once, an informant shoved me, called me nosy, told me to get lost. Still, I pressed on. I learned to live for the moments in between. A fresh notebook, the cassette snap of my secondhand recorder, spiraling steam rising from a nighttime cup of gyokuro tea in an empty diner. Anger was my engine, serenity my shield. I was always awake, always watching. One autumn, everything pivoted. The lead came by accident. A line in a message from a contact. There's something wrong at Higashi Central Hospital. Management. Fraud, maybe. The paper's editors ignored me when I pitched it. Too risky. Leave it for real reporters, they said. I went alone. Nurses cryptic, staff defensive, all fear behind pale blue masks. Eventually, a woman from accounting, eyes darting, slipped me a USB drive outside the hospital cafeteria during a lunch rush. She left with a bowed head, vanishing into the crowd. That drive held emails, payments to ghost employees, unbilled surgeries, insurance fraud, millions siphoned off while patients sat on waiting lists for months. I vetted every word, triple-checked sources. My phone buzzed with threats. I worked in secret for weeks. Cigarette ash on notebooks, crumpled receipts inked with scribbled phone numbers. My hands shook sometimes when I wrote, but I kept writing. My editor buckled at the last minute, saw the proof, the scale. I saw his hands tremble as he paged through the documents. We published under both our names. The fallout was immediate. Police raids, hospital board resignations, city hall scrambling for cover. I tasted vindication for the first time, metallic, fleeting. But there would be more stories, more rejections, more fights. Then the phone calls began. National publications, international outlets. I did interviews on live radio, in studios where the air was sharp with ozone and nervous tension. Awards came, impressively heavy in my hands, though I still washed my mugs in a single-room kitchen when the cameras went home. My mother called once, voice trembling, and said, "I saw your face on television." Nothing more. I sat on the floor afterward and stared at my knees, exhausted and elated at once. That winter, I got an invitation. A local library organizing a town event panel discussion with Tokyo journalists about speaking truth to power. They wanted someone from the community. My old neighborhood. I could have said no. Every rational thought clanged against the idea. I hadn't set foot there in 4 years, not since that studio critique. Leaving felt like survival. Returning was something else. But I said yes, because underneath the anger was a quieter need, to show not for vengeance, but for closure. Not to wound, but to stand whole in front of those who thought me nothing. I arrived early. The city's edges felt less sharp than before. Winter's first snow smeared the rooftops like spilled salt. The old public library, a squat brick building sandwiched between noodle shops, looked the same. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed above sagging shelves. Someone had hung up glossy posters with my face, a moment both surreal and oddly comforting. Stage chairs faced an audience of maybe 100, and there in the front row, trailing in awkward clusters, were the old faces. Uncle Kazu in his windbreaker, Aunt Rina with her floral scarf, Mrs. Saito clutching a program, Hiroki smirking with his girlfriend beside him. My mother arrived last, alone, wrapped in a heavy navy coat. I felt the old anger, like phantom pain. But I also felt calm. For the first time, the serenity won. The panel started. Stiff questions about ethics, courage, the burden of truth. I answered flatly, describing the sleepless months, the near misses. Some audience members scribbled notes. Most just watched. Then the host said, "We have a special presentation." They wheeled out a display board, huge, professional, crowded with headlines. There were clippings from every major paper. Tokyo hospital fraud exposed. Inside the Shinjuku scandal, a journalist's quest. Glossy photos of police raids. My own face,